This is Mile High.
Do I want to tell the story or do I want to show the message?
You've got a lot of work to do between Mile High.
The time has come where we can know
we have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Above, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right, it is not. It is a receiver of thought. Because love is my first technique.
it's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are joining us from. We are, of course, at altitude of 5,280 feet, which was where we hope you to be in September. There's nowhere else you want to be in September other than higher ground at Mile High. You can get all the details about that at riseuptomilehigh.com. We're about to announce the speakers and the theme pretty darn soon, so watch for that. Today, I'm really thrilled to have on this episode and for you to all listen, watch, wherever you are watching, whether it be Apple or Stitcher or any podcast channel, YouTube, that you actually hit subscribe. You never want to miss any Mile High Tech, but I'm really grateful to have on this episode Dr. Alan Miner. He's a Parker graduate from 2003 and runs up a number of projects. He may be one of the only people that I have spoken to that seems to be running like me and juggling more projects, but all very dedicated to chiropractic and our philosophy and values, but really helping chiropractors and teams get together and get associates linked up with different offices. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Alan Miner.
Thanks for having me, Doc. It's been a big fan for years. It's an honor to be on here with you today.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. And the first thing I've got to ask is, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah, Miner, M-I-N-E-R. Yep.
I get confused and concerned that I want people's announcement. Same thing in my office. I make sure I'm saying their name right. First thing I want to know is how did you find your way into the chiropractic world?
Yeah. I have an uncle who practiced for years in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I actually went down another path, got a finance degree and was in the business world. I had some nasty migraines that he referred me to a chiropractor, helped me. Never had another migraine since I started getting my atlas adjusted. But I hated my life as a finance person, and the one adult I knew who seemed to really love his life and always had great stories and just seemed purposeful. I didn't really understand the concept of purpose, but was my Uncle Ernie. And so when I decided it was time for a career change, I called him, and that was really the path. And it's been just a huge path of blessings ever since I decided and found that purpose to be a chiropractor.
That's really funny because at some point, I'm sure, because we run in a lot of the same circles, you're going to meet my son and talk to him. He just entered chiropractic school, and he got a finance degree. And he had a job, and he was about a year and a half in. He said he just couldn't do it anymore and decided to go to chiropractic school.
Same story. Day one, I didn't grow up around a family that talked about purpose. I don't remember really consciously knowing about that concept, but I knew my first day at that job that I felt like a caged animal. And it's amazing how many of the people that lie on our tables we get to take care of, we take for granted what it means to have a career that's so purposeful and so fulfilling. And it's really the blessing of what chiropractic's been in our life. That's for sure.
Yeah. And he said the same thing. It's like, I said, how's it been now that you've been there for a couple months? He's like, it's awesome. He felt like he was going to, die if he continued in the job he was in.
You almost feel like you're getting away with something when you've been in the corporate world and you get to go back to chiropractic school. I mean, for the whole time, I felt like I pulled one over on somebody. I got out of this life that felt like a trap and into a life that's been anything but. It's been just wonderful since. So yeah, I can appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'm sure you'll run into him. You'll be able to share that story with him. So now what are some of the joys, since we just kind of went in that way? I wasn't thinking we were going to ask this. What are some joys of being a chiropractor that you really love?
Well, first of all, just starting there, I got to finagle my way into practice on my own right out of school, which would be hard to do today. Back then, they used to send you these blank checks from your credit card company.
Right, right.
And I after a bunch of bankers turned me down, I used those to get my first practice going. And even, early in those days when I didn't know how I was going to pay the rent and I didn't know what I was doing, it was still so invigorating compared to going into that office job and feeling like I was trapped. So that alone has always been great. But then you start, I don't think I'd ever sold anything in my life until I sold my first care plan and my first chiropractic adjustments. And, pretty quick, it always worked out. It always has for 22 years. And then the stories started coming, and just, the joy of watching the state somebody walked into our practices, watching how they walked out, watching that light in their eyes, has always been just something fun. And then that light bulb moment when people start to understand the way we look at things with this inside out approach, and, just the simple analogies we all use. I used to always love it when we talk about fevers and, why do you go camping, and what do you do to make the water safe to drink, and why do you heat it up, and, well, what do you think your body's doing? When that light bulb goes off, and when they would look at a nerve chart and understand, wow, this runs the whole body. Nobody's ever talked to me about that. And for me, then it was when families adopted this as a lifestyle. We have big family practices, and when you really see them get past the condition of why they came in and make the switch to, this is so that we can optimize our family's health, so our kids reach their potential. That's fun, man. I mean, it was just high fives and hugs and loving on people all day. And, some love our message, some didn't, but we've always been so clear on what we did and why we did it. It's fulfilling work. And then of course you see the miraculous people walk that couldn't, and the babies that are functioning when they couldn't, and the pregnant moms. It just, really every aspect of it. And then the fun thing, interestingly enough, is it evolved into business. I was never an entrepreneur. We built one of these big 1,100 a week behemoth practices that was in a lot of ways funner than anything, but in a lot of ways a train wreck and a nightmare. And we learned so much about taking care of people and values in business. And so there's just literally, Danny, been lessons at every step of the way that then have, I almost feel like it's like, if you can make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere. If you can make it in chiropractic, other businesses are a lot easier. I've definitely learned that. So I don't know. It's been a joy, and we're still very much in all of it. So
excellent. So, with that scaling practices, how many practices were you running? Just so I get
we've been up to 7. We have 4 right now. We have 3 in Albuquerque, 1 in McKinney, Texas. And we actually opened 3, to talk transparently, because everybody always talks about how great they are. I've had a ton of failure, and most of what I do is from my scar tissue. We closed 3 clinics in Dallas last year, which was painful to do, but it was, lifting clinics from scratch. I think we're probably a little better suited these days to take over existing clinics that are already operating. And so we've probably owned 10 altogether, but we operate 4 right now. And we're just, really building up the 4 we have. And I think in the future, we'll probably go try to find clinics that have been around for 20, 30 years, have an associate or 2 in them. And we're really good at stepping into those already existing clinics, then launching them from scratch is what we learned in the last couple of years.
Well, now you said something that I've learned from too. I tend to learn from scar tissue. Maybe not the best way to learn, but it works. It's something I've learned from. So you mentioned about that. What are some top things that you learned from having multiple clinics and also larger super clinics, as you said?
Sure. The first thing that I've never heard a coach say, but I share regularly is, I don't think you have any business opening a second clinic until you can leave your existing clinic for 3 months. And if 3 months later you walk back in and everything's stable, then I think you're off and running with multiple clinics. But
that's a really good. Thank you for saying that. That's a really insightful.
Well, that's where, we got over our skis opening other clinics, and I was still in the first clinic, and you just don't appreciate. You think you have systems dialed in and the right people and the right procedures, but until you don't have to be there for 3 months and you can prove that it's grown or at least stayed the same, then you truly do have a system that can run without you. And so that, if nobody told me that, that would have saved me a lot of time and pain. And then the other one, when I look at our failed clinics, it was always around staff in the way, a lot of the work we do at Chiro Matchmakers was born out of why some of our clinics really took off and some of them never did. And it always came down to the personalities and the behavioral makeup of the whole team, the CA, the doctor.
I
And
have to
so we
say
really,
that's so true. It's so
well,
true.
we started, and we had some clinics. It was, looking back, maybe a blessing. We had clinics closed for different reasons. One was a great doc who got inspired to be a chiropractor from my clinic, and we brought him back in to open a satellite. And he was, what we've learned, Danny, we've done different behavioral assessments on over 10,000 chiropractors now. 70% of our profession are wired as what we call caregivers.
Exactly.
They would have been in another life a great accountant or architect or engineer. They're detail oriented, they're loyal, they're specific, they love predictability and stability. And so we just found from our work at Chiro Matchmakers, that's the majority of our profession is wired that way. On a side note, it's why so often the bonus systems for compensation have failed for offices, because most of our profession, they want a stable job, a predictable job that they know it's expected of them, and they want to make a solid living doing that work. In a solid salary, they will work a lot harder for than these weird bonus compensation models. And so I had one office I opened. Now, the other side of that is 30% of chiropractors, half of those are entrepreneurs, and about 15% sit in the middle. We call them business builders. And if you're on that side of the fence, you like bonuses, you like no ceiling on what you do.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, people who really work good with those bonus models are really a flight risk as an associate. They have a dream to get out on their own, and you can't keep them away from that. So I had the two extremes. I had a doc who was a hardcore caregiver that I put into an office that failed. And I had a doc who was a hardcore entrepreneur that I put into an office. And after 6 months, he went to do his own thing. And I instantly learned, wow, this is really expensive to fail. And what happened? So that's how we went on this journey of, we had a few other clinics at the time that were doing well. And we started to learn, okay, what in our systems, who's the right person that works best? What are we built for? How do we support them so that they have the greatest chance for success? And out of that is how Chiro Matchmakers was born, because as we talk to chiropractors, a lot of them have the story of, I had an associate and he left me after 6 months and started his own clinic. Well, we know that story now. That's an entrepreneur. Or more often, it's owners that are really frustrated with chiropractors because they weren't able to go do talks or screenings or bring in new patients the way that the owner could. And the owner completely missed that they had the gem of a doctor who would have stayed with them for a whole career taking care of people, but they wanted him to be like the owner, and they never realized, hey, you're wired differently as an owner, and that's okay, but the business doesn't need lots of entrepreneurs running around. You need some people who are going to do the work. And so that actually, before we ever got into staffing, we would just go into clinics and we'd have a lot of offices that couldn't keep somebody at the front desk, or they kept having associates leave. So we would just do assessments trying to look at, okay, who's making up your team? And like all of us, we tend to hire the same people. So that's great, but then you end up having deficiencies. We've really learned the best teams are diverse. You got different people from different areas of life with different behavioral makeups. Those are the best teams, because everybody, like a good marriage, you make up each other's weaknesses with your strengths. And we think in business and in chiropractic offices that we've seen that's very much the same story.
You mentioned Chiro Matchmakers. I want to ask you more questions, chiropractic and business-wise. Can you share a little bit about what Chiro Matchmakers is and how people learn more?
Yep, we've been around 7 years. We do associate doctor and CA placements. Last year, we placed 250 associates around the US and outside of the US, but most are in the States. And then we also do virtual chiropractic assistance now. And that's been really fun because as labor costs have gone up, most owners have had the pain of a key CA leaving, and all of a sudden your business just stops in the mud. And so we've been using virtual assistants from offshore for years at Chiro Matchmakers when we're doing all these behavioral assessments and reading resumes and matching people to our offices that we're working for. There's a lot of behind the scenes data entry and processing. So we've been working with teams out of Mexico and Honduras and the Philippines for years. And we realized what happened, Annie, is a lot of our owners, when we get on a call, they want an associate, but when we look at the math of the practice, the truth is they're not in a place to hire an associate. And so if the owner is taking home $150,000, there's not enough money there to pay an associate as well and still have them provide for their family. So we're finding a lot of the calls we get on, the clinic makes $300,000-$500,000. They've got 3, 4, 5 staff, and the numbers aren't there. So we started wondering, what could we do to help these offices so that, they usually want to get some time freedom because their kids are getting older or they're getting busier and they need to help more people, and maybe their technique takes time, whatever the reason. We started realizing we could probably train all of our virtual assistants to be CAs. So we put all of our VAs, they go through CA training, and then they get HIPAA certified, and then they work for us, and we deploy them for offices. And it's been the funnest thing because most people have heard of virtual assistants. They've never heard of virtual chiropractic assistants. And so all those things that owners and their staff don't like doing or don't get done or are monotonous, those are the kinds of things we take on. So, we do a lot of phone answering, a lot of KPI metrics, a lot of insurance verification, a lot of social media, Instagram posting and liking and editing, a lot of, assistant type work with scheduling, texting, with travel. And it's been the funnest thing when we can get a doc to claw back 10 hours of their time so they can use that doing what they do to make the most money, which is seeing patients, to bring another 100, 200,000 of revenue so they can get to the point where they can afford that associate and not have to take money out of their own pocket they need to live on. Now they can pay the associate more. They don't have that odd stress of, that's where those weird bonus programs came from, is, I'll pay you 35,000. And if you hit all these bonuses, you'll get a bunch of money. That honestly often came from owners not being able to afford the associate. So they're trying to keep the overhead low. But the truth is, if you're an associate and you're going to excel in that atmosphere, you're going to go do it on your own anyways. So anyways, and then the other thing is now, gosh, we have owners that are, getting rid of some of their staff because it's less expensive. We're about $13, $14, $15 an hour for college educated people to come on your team. We train them for your systems. We build the SOP. So it's been, and then we have solo practitioners who are practicing. So our CAs can help them run coverage so that they can do it on their own because they want to keep things simple. It's been really interesting. Also freeing up CAs just to not have to do, a lot of them don't like KPIs or getting metrics or calling insurance companies or doing follow-up calls. So if the CA's happier in their job, doing what they love, they're likely to stick around with the practice longer and not having to do all the monotonous work that they don't enjoy. So it's been fun because every day we get on the phone with chiropractors who are like, this is interesting. Tell me, what is this? How could I use this in my business? And that's hard to find in chiropractic, where it's kind of a new concept, and we're really just having a blast on that side of it too.
Excellent. So with that, what are some best ways to create healthy relationships between the associate doctors and the owners?
Yep. I'll tell you my biggest secret, and this always hits owners weird, but I
want to hear this.
Being transparent with your books.
Interesting.
As soon as I started showing my P&L statement every month to my docs, everything changed in my world because I'd have these weird bonus structures and there'd be months that I was losing money, but I'd have to pay a bonus because of what I set up a year ago. And most of the staff never really appreciates the expense of running a clinic, and they have a skewed view that the doc's just killing it and taking advantage of everybody. And when they see the true numbers, you're the owner, you should make a profit. Everybody knows that. I've never had any associates have a problem with that. And most people want to work for a successful person, but when the books are open, a lot of that tension goes away because it's transparent. Also, in the times we've had tough times, and we've even had to ask some of our associates to take a salary cut because we hit a dip, they've always been willing to do it because they know the state of the business. They know where we're at, and it kind of brings the whole team on board. So I think just being open and honest with your books goes a long way. Also, how many chiropractors have kind of sold a vision of what they want, but it's not reality? If you're working for somebody, you want to know you're going to get paid. And I think that builds trust when they can see that, hey, this business is profitable. This business makes sense for me to join up with. And so that's my first answer, is just being open with the numbers of the business goes a long way. And most chiropractors go, oh my gosh, no way. I run my travel, my country club, my student loans, my health insurance. I don't want everybody to see all that. But the truth is, if you're running all that through your business, you don't really know how much it costs you to run your business. And so if you can get those expenses into your household where they really should be, now you can be honest and open with your business. And if you can't do it, at least move the profit up to a holding company and then charge all your expenses through the holding company, and nobody has to see that. But at least you can have an honest set of books of what everybody's, what it costs to run the business. And just most staff never really appreciate just how expensive it is to keep a clinic open and running. And so, yeah.
Right. Well, and that comes back to the finance background, doesn't it?
Probably so. Yeah. Really, it was, I noticed I had resentment with some of my early associates both ways. They saw my house, they saw my car, and then I'm having to go into my savings to make up a shortage. And I realized this feels weird. Like they think reality's different and I'm upset. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to open this up. And boy, that changed. All of a sudden we were all on the same team. I don't know a better way to say it. So I'm a big fan of that.
Got it. Well, so, what are the things that when you've seen doctors really thrive, that now they have an associate on board, what are the characteristics that you've seen in those offices?
Where it tends to work best is when you hire somebody, there's an exchange, right? Usually a lot of times they're buying extra capacity, but most of the time, the truth is you're buying time freedom.
Right.
And so if you can, early on when a new associate starts, if you can take the majority of your workload and have that associate step in and take it over, right out of the gate, it feels like you're in fair exchange. And that works really well. So if I was seeing 200 people a week and I get a great associate who can step in and take over 200 a week, and all of a sudden I just have my week back, it feels, everything about that feels good. Where we see it go sideways is when you're still seeing everybody. Now you're an associate, but you feel like they're not carrying their weight because you're trying to grow up their practice. Here's a couple other insights that are interesting, Danny. And maybe this is a little controversial, but just we've done enough placements that I'm happy to share it. The A players are employed. And so if they're a great associate, they're probably in a job, they're probably making $80,000 to $100,000 a year. And the truth is, if somebody's not employed, this is a generalization, but usually they're not the A player. So if you're going to have somebody step into your business and immediately be able to give the same level of care, your people will love them. They have the bedside manner. They know the technique. You're going to have to attract them out of the job they're in into the job you have. And the truth is, money is the biggest thing that does it, because like I said earlier, 70% of our profession are caregivers. They value stability.
Right.
So why am I going to leave the world I know and I'm making 90,000 for another $80,000 job? I'm not. I'm going to need to make 110, 115. Now that's interesting. I might be willing to make a move. And so the owner, how this works is the owner needs to be, if out of the gate, I know that I could give this associate 200 visits, and let's say that that generated $400,000 or $500,000 a year for the business. I feel really good knowing I'm paying that person 110, 115, because I know they're generating 3, 4, 5 times what I'm paying them. That feels, part of that goes to their salary, part of it to cover the office overhead, and part of it should come to me as the owner taking all the risk to build the business. That works really well almost every time. Now,
Right.
I hate to say it, you might have seen this. I know about your heart injury. Where this works best is when there's an injury.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm not saying fake an injury, but it's really funny when a chiropractor, an owner, suddenly can't adjust, and somebody comes to take over and help them out. Every patient stays because they love the owner, they're loyal, they get it. When the owner leaves because they're busy, they're downsizing, they're going on a sabbatical, they're selling the business, a lot of people leave because people don't like change. But it's this funny dynamic we've seen over about 50 clinics. When the owner needs an associate because they've been injured, everybody stays. The owner's still around. And I don't want to say fake an injury when you're transitioning, but it's funny. That is the easiest way to switch out the owner to an associate, and you just get instant grace from people. So I'm not advocating for, like I said, faking.
Right, but you're just saying when they have some attachment to the emotional connection to the office of the practitioner.
Yeah, they don't feel like they just got walked out on. That's when, half the practice leaves with the owner right away. Even if the owner's not leaving, but just downsizing and only in a day a week, everybody wants to still see the owner. But when the owner's still there, but they just physically can't adjust for some reason, then people don't care. They're happy to go to the associate. And then after a couple months, they know the associate, they're happy to stay there. So anyways, that's just, there are a lot of clinic owners we know that are great at seeding clinics, growing them from scratch, bringing in new grads, helping them grow up and developing them. But you got to be wired for that. And that's a different lift than just being able to have somebody step in day one and take over the practice. And so anyways, it's just some insights that a lot of chiropractors, another one is the average salary today is about 85,000. COVID moved that up. We're seeing a lot of jobs north of 100,000 now. We're on the phone all day with owners, and a lot of them just haven't looked at associates in 5 or 6 years, and they're shocked at supply and demand. During COVID, we saw there were about 5 or 6 office positions for every one associate. And so as the supply shrunk on associates and the demand went up, the salary moved up, and that hasn't gone back down. So it's just, I want owners to know the numbers, because a lot of times they think, well, I'll get somebody for 40, 50,000. And the truth is, you're either getting an entrepreneur who's going to leave you pretty quick and go do it on their own, or you're getting somebody who isn't really able to get work at other places. And then you end up having the pain of that associate. So, and that's good for the associates too. If they're trying to up their value and make a better living, they just need to appreciate, you have to be able to take good care of people in the model of that clinic so that you're given value. And that's how the clinic makes money. And once you understand that as an associate, you can invest in your skill set, train so that you can immediately jump in, and you're going to be able to command a lot bigger salary when you can bring that to an office.
Yeah, interesting. So let me ask you this. What, on the opposite side of this, what have you seen in associates? What are their qualities or characteristics that of the ones associate doctors that thrived?
Yeah, in today's world, I hesitate to say this, but it's a true variable. Big social media followings are attractive to owners these days.
Interesting.
A lot of students, they share their life, they've got a niche, and if they pull up to a clinic and they've got a few 100,000 followers and they can start blasting about the clinic and all of a sudden people are showing up, that's a big ace up their sleeve to bring value to a clinic right away. So that's something all students I would suggest could start cultivating, is their online, who they are and what they stand for inside of chiropractic.
Mhm.
The other one is adjusting skills. Chiropractic is hard to place. We're the only profession where usually, all right, your technical abilities match, you're hired. In chiropractic, it's like everything matches. Now I'm going to lie down and adjust me. And all day long, we hear from owners, I loved them, but their hands were horrible. I can't use them. I don't have the time to train them. So I think a lot of students I want them to appreciate the importance of knowing the art and the craft in where, however you specialize in, that an owner can instantly deploy you to take care of people, to earn money, to pay you your salary. And if you show up and you don't have that skill set, you better hope you find an owner with a big heart who loves to teach people, who will bring you along, because they're going to have to build your value as you train. So,
well, this is all very, very insightful. Now, you also do things with finding chiropractic assistants to help in doctors' offices.
Yeah, those are, we average placing an assistant in 25 days. That's kind of our bread and butter. And a lot of offices are just too busy. They don't want to mess with it. So they're happy to outsource it. We charge $3,500 for a CA placement. And, some offices aren't busy enough. They're happy to post the ads and review the resumes, but we do the whole thing from beginning to end. And what we do, that's our big secret, is along with the behavioral assessment for CAs, we use a cognitive assessment. And so if you've ever had a CA where you trained them once and in a week or two, they know the whole office, or you've had a CA where 3 months in, you're like, we've been over this 15 times and they're still not understanding it. People don't realize you can actually measure that cognitive ability and how quick people will learn. And so that's what we use on CAs. So, when we're hiring CAs, we run the job ads, we do the interviews, we do the cognitive assessments, the behavioral assessments. So when we send somebody in for the doc to interview, we've done all the groundwork, and you've got the resume, if they're on the backside of the bell curve, so they're able to learn your systems quickly so that they can jump in and be up to speed in a few weeks. If you need somebody who's detailed or who's really outgoing and personable, or, who's kind of more dominant and can collect money from people, whatever it is you need, we can build that to find the CA. So that's how we find CAs. That's a fast process. That really is.
Interesting. So, because this is something that more so, well, correct me if I'm wrong, because you probably are doing more in this process than I am. I have one office. I'm not, interviewing and locating team members to be in multiple offices. Have you found that to become more of a concern since 2020?
In terms of CAs or DCs?
Both. Well, I was thinking CAs, but yes, both.
Yeah, we're still placing under 30 days. What's changed is rate. These days, a lot of the fast food restaurants pay $18 an hour. I think California just passed a law where it's got to be up to 20. So that means that the chiropractic office probably needs to be paying $25 to $30 an hour to start to get, people that are sort of in that in between zone, that are typically CAs. They're not fast food workers. They're not professionals with the degrees. They're somewhere in between. So as long as the salary goes up, and, we're big advocates, a lot of chiropractors are hesitant to raise rates, but my goodness, with inflation around the world, there's never been an easier time to bump up your rates 10 or 15 or $20. Nobody seems to hesitate at that, and they're used to it happening everywhere else. And if that's what you need to do to be able to, one thing I've learned in staffing, Doc, is you do get what you pay for. And we see that with associates. Like when somebody has the confidence that they're worth $115,000, $120,000, it's a different person than the person who takes a job for $60,000, $70,000. And it's the same thing when you get a CA for $15 an hour. It's a different caliber person than the $25 or $30 an hour person. It's just, I know we want to pretend that's not how it is a lot of times, but we see it with the cognitive scores. We won't be getting good candidates. Nobody's scoring high enough. And all of a sudden, it varies obviously in city to city, but you go above a certain mark, and now all of a sudden the people applying are scoring good on the cognitive. And so it does money matters. It really does on the quality of people that will give up their time to come work with you.
What's the dollar range that you noticed that?
We used to notice it north of $20. Lately, it's been more around 25.
That doesn't surprise me.
At 18, 19, 20, it's like, man, we're not getting good candidates. And all of a sudden the job goes, to 23 or to 25. And hey, all of a sudden now we got 10 people to send you that fit the profile. So we don't do those on doctors because if they passed all the boards, they've got the cognitive ability to, but we do that on CAs for sure.
And that's going to vary obviously depending on your area, because different regions have different income and educational levels.
It does. It's variable. And, you can, in today's world, just Google, what does a chiropractic assistant make in Boulder? What does a associate doctor in Boulder make? And you're going to get data right away on what the salary range is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's still going to probably be in the same ballpark, but it's not going to shift by too much. But there are different economics. So, wow, I'm getting education being here. So I know I'm going to want to follow up with you on a number of things that you talked about for myself. So, and for our office. So really, really good. Is there any last thing that you'd want to share with chiropractic students?
We have something so valuable. We know it from how chiropractic impacts somebody's health. I see chiropractors that have always chased so many blinky, shiny things. But when you look at the power of when an adjustment takes sometimes a couple minutes, maybe 5, what you're delivering in that time frame and what we can charge, I think it's probably the best service business in the world. We used to run this high volume clinic and the adjustments took a couple minutes, and that we could charge back then it was $40, $50. Now we charge $80, $90 per adjustment. And you can see 20, 30 people in an hour. A massage therapist has to spend a whole hour for that same rate with one person. And so I think sometimes chiropractors lose sight of, and we are changing lives with our hands. I mean, we've all seen it. And literally it's the power of just the adjustment and what that does in a person's life. And so if nothing else, I just want to tell you every day we're talking to, practices now, they're doing $2-3 million just doing chiropractic, let alone some of these ones that add in other functional stuff. They go up to 5 million. Here's the point. You can make a great living as an owner, and you can make a great living today as an associate. There's room for both. And I think we always had this thing of taking advantage of associates and not paying, but it was just because of the economics. We couldn't afford to pay them well, but the world's changed. It's coming to us, and it's exciting to see the numbers of all these practices, how profitable so many of them are. It's a bright future for us. There was no Whole Foods when I started, Doc. Here's a good one I look at. When I started, like the vaccine rate was like 96%. How many people didn't do the COVID vaccine? Like something like 30, 40%. There's a shift. People are coming to our side of the fence. You see it on social media. So I think the more that you stand proud for your values, there's a lot of people looking for you in your community, and they're willing to pay you, for your services. So.
I gotta say, you said that there was no Whole Foods when you started practicing. We didn't have a website, so I don't know if I'm okay to admit that. I had a little time without email in practice. So,
here's what's funny. We started a website, but we didn't really know what the point was. We were just, guess I'll do it. We're supposed to. So anyways,
I had practice members the first year or two in practice said, "Hey, you don't have a website. I can build you one." I was like, okay, do I need one?
I love it. Awesome.
So, those people want to get their trade in for something at that point, right? So I'm sure you remember that. So,
I do. Good. I had somebody offer to trade me Bitcoin and I turned it down, and that probably was hundreds of thousands of dollars that I turned down.
Well, I know you're juggling so many things, and I thank you for taking your time to be on this episode of the podcast. I'm going to encourage people when I share it that people listen to it a couple times, because there is a lot of very important information that you shared. And how can people connect with you, learn more about Chiro Matchmaker overall?
Sure. Yeah, our website, chiromatchmakers.com, and I'm on there. If anybody wants to email me, I'm at alan@dralanminer.com. Yeah, but Chiro Matchmakers is probably the easiest way to get a hold of us. Just Google it.
Thank you so much for taking your time. And everyone, thank you for being a subscriber. And if you're not a subscriber, hit subscribe now. And also for an attendee of Mile High. If you have not registered for Mile High 12, now's the time to do it, because once we start announcing the speakers and start announcing the theme, you're going to say, I wish I had registered. So do it now. Look forward to seeing you. Rise up to milehigh.com and watch for the next episode. It keeps changing spines, lives, and minds with chiropractic.